Hotep, I'm Dr. Gloria Lattimore Peace, host and producer of OmniU Presents the H3O Art of Life show. Umoja is the message, a call for unity, but today we're looking more at the principle of Ujamaa, which is cooperative economics. Specifically, the title of this show is Wealth and Women, or Women and Wealth, equally interchangeable. And it's my pleasure to have with me the president of the League of Black Women, Sandra Finley. And she has a lot of good ideas about how women can aspire to arise from the doldrums of poverty and take their rightful place in the workforce and in the world. And I'm very happy to greet you, Sandra.
Thank you so much. I'm just delighted to be back here with you.
Well, I'm glad to have you back, and I think I should probably reacquaint my audience with you. I did ask you about how long the League of Black Women had been in existence, and we figured it out that it's about 46 years old, about to be 50 in a minute.
About to be 50 in a minute.
And you are the president and have been for about 16 years, and I asked you facetiously if you're a glutton for punishment, because I know how heavy the role of responsibility is to be head of an organization, particularly one that is trying to make the kind of changes that your organization seeks to make. So talk about your journey and talk about where you are presently, and I will just sit here and admire you.
Well, the answer to your question, am I a glutton for punishment? Actually, I'm just an insatiable appetite for hope. And it's hope that keeps my feet forward and my heart forward and my head engaged in what our possibilities are. Now, the organization was founded in 1970 by women, a circle of women who had that kind of foresight and hope. Dr. Arnita Young Boswell, a civil rights leader, educator, and advocate for the idea that women could actually have an idea of themselves and actually work towards the best ideas for our future. Circled with a group of her friends and supporters, and they founded a League of Black Women. And I have the charter statement, and it's just a beautiful thing. It says that we should rise and aspire to be all the beauty and the strength and the power that Black women can be. And after having laid that down as a foundational statement, you spend the next years putting that in place. And I've not been the only president of the League of Black Women, but each woman has given her own contribution in the leadership chair to taking us a step forward. So the work of the League of Black Women on my watch shifted. I asked Arnita for the opportunity to lead the work in this direction. And that would be a full focus on producing research on the potential of Black women. There's been plenty created on the state of us. Nothing except for what the League of Black Women does on our prospects. If we were to aim for our better stars and our better angels, what would that look like? Not only how we would have to change in order to make that journey, but how the world would have to change to get ready for us with these new ambitions. And it just so happens last evening I was invited to a circle of young women who were asked to gather around the business for their best ideas for what their futures could be. And they had remarkable things to say. And my thought was, we didn't start the League of Black Women not a moment too soon. Because the things that they want to do require a communal response that had not been in place before. But now these are things that we know and we can help all along the way.
Let me ask you, or let me share, that years ago, and it's been a few, when I was growing up, when you were asked what you wanted to be when you grew up, it was almost always you wanted to be, a teacher, a doctor, a nurse, or something like that. And you expected to be married. You expected to have 2 children, a boy and a girl. It never occurred to me, and most of us growing up, that we could find ourselves in a position of being heads of households and needing to be able to take care of families. And now you have a situation in which women are increasingly heads of households, and a whole family relies upon them, at least for many years, for their well-being and their welfare. So that if women don't begin to think early about how they will take care of themselves, because I always knew I would have a husband and he would have a job and he would take care of me. That my father had a job and he took care of us. And so that's the way it's supposed to go. You know, you grow up and you become this person, but you always had this backup. You always had this man who provided for you, and you weren't entirely dependent upon yourself. But now you have increasingly women who are entirely dependent upon themselves, with others who are entirely dependent upon them. So the landscape seems to have shifted, and therefore we need to have young women think of how to take care of themselves, whether or not someone else is willing or able to take care of them, so that they can be partners, if nothing else, in the well-being and care of themselves and their families. So when you're talking to these young women, are they talking about being able to care for themselves, or are they still having that conversation about getting married and having a boy and a girl?
Wow. Well, let me take pieces of that. That was by itself a whole conversation worth of possibilities there. The conversation on, you're right, the early conversation on what you wanted to be made an assumption that what you do is what you would be. And the things that we did back in the days could be 30 years worth of do. The careers that you start at could be the career that you completed. But it's not that way anymore. So you will do a whole lot of things in the process of a lifetime of career that by no means would limit the concept of be. So now we got to come back and look at the difference between what I do and who I be. And that's exciting, because the possibilities of things to touch and experience, ideas and joys to be experienced in the concept of be, oftentimes not possible in the full range of do. Now, do is normally connected to our jobs, what we do for the work, whether we work for other people or whether we own our own enterprises or whether we volunteer, whatever. It's about those things. And there's only so much you can get out of the do. So we found in modern times the better emphasis is on the be, and let the do be a resource for powering the potential for what I be. And the women that I've listened to and talked with, we're mostly interested in discussing the be. You know, who and how will I form me? What matters towards what I feed myself in the terms of not only what I eat, but what I think and what I surround myself with. How they're taking responsibility, Dr. Peace, for forming themselves.
Right.
And as leaders. Now, they know that other forces have to cooperate with that, but they know that they're in the driver's seat, and they know that pretty early. Now, the business of who I partner with, I think that black women have been always heads of households. What was different is that we didn't always have to be alone in that. The singularity of it is a different kind of phenomenon as that grows. And so now you're right, the backup might not be who you thought it was going to. The husband in the house or the partner in the house might not be in the house. Your house just might be about you. And so you'll make choices now. We're asking women, make choices that sync first with you. In order to do that, you've got to get a real good handle on your sense of you, not only as you are, but aiming towards what you consider to be your best life or the best expression of you. So what I heard the young women say is that they wanted to center themselves on a closer exploration of themselves. And once that is, they got a handle on that,
well, you know,
they
that's
can move
just
forward.
Such an interesting thing to do, because in order to concentrate on who you be, or who you are, you have to see yourself as an individual. And when I think about myself, I saw myself as a part of a unit which was a family. I saw myself as someone's daughter, someone's niece, someone's sister, or whatever. I saw myself always in relationship to other people. And who I be was always a part of a unit without a separate self. So that who I was becoming more of the same. I was going to be, my parents' child, and then I was going to be my husband's wife, my children's mother, and because I was counseled that I was a born teacher, I was going to be a teacher. So what I do or did was going to be who I be. I be a teacher, I be a mother, I be a wife, I be a child, a daughter. And so there was no separation. There was no way to see myself. There was no reason to exist except in relationship to a kinship group. There was no way for me to see decisions that I made as independent of their effect on others, mainly my children as an adult, mainly my parents as a child. Your mother and father would tell you, you can't do that, you will disgrace us. You mind your manners because your home, your upbringing would be reflected in the way you behaved in the public. So to be and to do were essentially inseparable. They were not, you could not see when I grow up as an I that was separated. They said, what are you going to be when you grow up? But it almost always had ancillaries. It never was that you were going to be something. You certainly didn't expect to be unmarried. You might wind up that way, but you didn't anticipate that because you were going to be, like as I said, you were going to be a part of a unit. That unit was a family, and the things that you do were all connected to that vision of yourself. So I'm trying to feel how it would feel if I could ever get to the point at which I could see myself separate and apart from that.
From that integral.
Yeah.
So here's this is helpful. The business of individuating does not mean isolating. It doesn't mean isolating. Individuating. You have a baby. You carry a baby in your body, and then you birth the baby out. The birth process is individuating the baby so that it can operate on its own systems, okay? It doesn't mean that the baby is isolated from you, but it also means that the baby is not what it was before, an integral part of, of your internal system. And so you now got this individual who you are now, as the parent, teaching how to relate to the forces and the people and the energies around him or her. So the first thing the baby becomes aware of, which is the big surprise, is it's a sense of itself. And it spends the next few months working on demand for self. The baby, I want to eat now. Never mind what you want to feed me. I want to eat now. I'm not comfortable. I'm wet. Or I'm pleased. Or I'm interested. Or whatever. Or I itch. It's all about I. And then you spend the next few years, as you say, teaching that baby that its relationship to other people help the baby's likelihood for viability to be a whole lot better than if it only sees only itself. But the first thing it is aware of is itself. And so women now have been socialized to believe that themselves don't matter all that much if it conflicts with what somebody else wants from them, even in that time. As a result, it's more difficult than it ever needed to be for us to have a sense of our own joy, our own aspirations, our own pleasures, our own capabilities, and what we do with our own time. And even in all of those realizations, what you get out of that is a fully formed sense of identity. And what you choose to do with that identity talks about the choices that you make to connect with other people, other movements, other parts of society. Our founder, Arnita Boswell, was well married, all right? She had given birth. She'd had a child, a daughter. She had a wonderful career of her own choosing, and she chose to serve. And what I like about, I got a chance to know her. What I like about what I understood about her story is everything about it was her choice. And it synced with what she thought she wanted to be involved with. So the man she married was the man she chose to marry, not just one who bumped up into her life and said, hey, it's you, like at a dance. The life she led, the course of teaching that she chose was because she chose it. And what she gave out of it was out of her own creativity and her best ideas. They lived in Hyde Park, which if you live in Chicago, those of you who are viewing, which I'm sure most of you do, then you know that neighborhood. So they chose to live in a vibrant community that had all the resources of the modern times. And so when she reached beyond the spaces of her own personal life into the nation's business, she reached with what she knew she was fully anchored in, a view that this world needed to change for its best opportunity. And she herself had quite a lot to bring to it. So she put herself in the place of power and influence to be able to have her hands on the best opportunities to make change happen. And so the young women that I listened to and talked with yesterday evening were about those early ideas of who they would be, what choices they would make, what collaterals would be touched and impacted by that, and what difference it makes when they make those decisions. And they were considering those at a fairly early age, rather than trying to make the best of parts of things that are already formed. Many of them will choose mates. Some of them will not choose mates or not be chosen by the potential mates that they would like to have. But in any situation, they understand it starts with them. And what's really exciting about this is I'm talking to young women of all races, and particularly for the interest of League of Black Women, talking to young black women as well about it and letting them know early on, you're going to have to throw off a whole lot of stuff that's going to be carried your way and set in your lap. You're going to have to throw off stereotypes about black women. You can't bundle those up and take those home and try to work with them. You're going to have to throw off the idea of limitations for black women, because you can't possibly chart yourself to your own stars if you already accept some constructs, some thinking constructs that won't let you figure out how to factor your possibilities there. And you're also going to have to throw away the idea that we have nothing to offer, or very little to offer, or it doesn't make any difference what we have to offer, and that all we're here to do is serve. You got to throw all that stuff off, otherwise you'll never see yourself. One of the coolest things that you get to do is look at yourself in the mirror long enough so that you can actually see yourself when you close your own eyes at night and absolutely fall in love with what you see. Absolutely, and fall in love with what you see. And that's the falling in love before you start putting stuff on. That you should do for your own entertainment, for the art of it, but not because that has anything to do with the fundamental you. You're going to have to get comfortable with the terror of risk. You're going to have to find a way to understand the passion that comes up that others will call anger, which is the heat of your ginning up to do what you got to do in the world by your own thing. And you've also got to get ready for passion. You know, just the pure heat of attraction, and choosing people to be in your life who contribute to that, not people who just come in and take it away and leave you with nothing but the cold of having not been well cared for. All of those things are part of the discussion on her. And a discussion that is going to start to take on earlier about making decisions on our economic well-being have to always start with a clear understanding that we have quite a lot to invest in the economic prospects of our nation, and the discussion on what we want in exchange for our investment, the return on investment, needs to be rich and well reasoned, and I think also well placed for the prospects of the longevity of our lives. Lastly, on this point, the business of our doing, the stuff that we do, as any kind of real definer for us, the difference in generations, these young women won't be doing any particular career thing for the long years of the sameness that we did. They will do things for 5 years, 3 years, and then they'll do something else, and then they'll do something else, and then they'll do something else, because the movement of the career market requires that kind of agility. And we need for them not to be off balance. We need for them to find themselves, in the rhythm of choices and opportunity.
That's instability. That's not really, I don't see that as so much as a rhythm. If you have to assume, it's almost as though you get a job, and as soon as you find out where the paper clips are stored, then you're moving out of that and you're becoming acquainted with another set of tasks, another job description, another set of relationships. Is this the kind of world that we want to leave intact? A world in which we have to keep reinventing ourselves and modifying ourselves and becoming some sort of chameleons or acrobats at, pretzels that twist this way and then form this shape, and and forever are trying to conform to a society that may not be the kind of society that is healthy for us to inhabit. Should we feed into that?
I'm going to give you a different view of that motion. Nature gets rid of organisms and things that cannot adapt. Even rocks adapt to the forces around it.
But nature is natural. Yes. So we don't start a man-made process and make that analogy.
But I am, because we are a natural expression of nature as well. So here's my point. It's not only, the young women I listened to weren't talking about adapting to all sorts of unseen, scary things. They were talking about understanding what their own interests were, and then looking for the opportunities, the best opportunities to express a career through their own interest. Mm-hmm. And so the change that comes is change that they welcome. They simply want, and they simply want to be aware that everything that they want is in no one place. And therefore what they need to do is get ready for being able to move. I think of it like jazz. There's the part that is laid down, and then there's the improvising that very skilled and masterful musicians know how to do. Mm-hmm. And so no one set is exactly the same as the one that was played earlier. Mm-hmm. And so these young women are preparing themselves for the mathematics of jazz, and they want to be masters of it, so that what is their life expression will be a very complex but very beautiful and unanticipated tapestry of their possibilities. Mm-hmm. And they're made for it because they are us. And they won't be afraid of it. And the structures that used to require that we commit ourselves to the 30-year run no longer require that. As a matter of fact, they no longer promise their support of that. You used to be able to work at a company and get your retirement, after your 30 years or so. And the company said, I need you to stay here because I need for you to be here over these years to do what I need you to do. And in exchange for that, you'll get your pay, and then you'll get an investment that we'll call your pension. Now, it's just as often as they'll tell you, there's very little here that we have to offer in the way of your pension. You need to set up your own investment portfolio so that you take care of your future retirement and financial needs. And that is oftentimes the case. The benefits packages that we used to get that would take care of us in our old age and whatever are being stripped so that there's less and less in them. And so you need to start paying attention earlier and earlier to what resources are you going to have to put in place in order to have the benefit that you want in place for when you want to pull those things down. And so an earlier eye on the idea of your future is going to be yielding a garden that is much more of your design rather than you're trying to make the best of whatever grew up in those spaces. And I'm excited by these women's ability, young women's ability, to look that stuff straight in the eye and say, okay, if that is going to be the way it is, bring it. You know, I'm up for this. I'm up for this game. I will muscle up, I will think up, I will get myself energized, and I will be informed. And the choices I make will be strong choices. And they will go through the review of my sense of me. And by the way, I'm a good person. I trust me. It's going to be fine.
Mm-hmm. Well, I find some comfort in the fact that improvisation is our strong suit as a people. Making a way out of no way has been our forte. It's been our fortitude. It has been what has enabled us to persevere and to survive.
And prosper.
And to thrive. I do understand that. But at some point, I think we need to think in terms of doing for self, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and others have often, Honorable Marcus Garvey, have put before us. Because you're in a system over which you have little control. In fact, into which you have little input on the level of decision making. There may be some things that you may not want to buy into. There may be things that you do not choose to do. There may be a lifestyle that you may not choose to live because it is the antithesis of who you see yourself as being, or what you see yourself as becoming, or what you regard as valuable. And I think at some point there's this crossroads where you have to decide whether or not you are going to continue to invest in a system that does not care about you at all, or does not care about humanity. And how then, if you decide that that's not what you want to do, what else you can do rather than do that. Because you can keep conforming, you can keep adjusting, you can keep adapting, but there's some point at which you become an aberration. You know, that you're not operating on the same theme, on a natural theme. Jazz music is my favorite music. But in jazz music, improvisation, even though it's spontaneous, it comes from a well, it comes from a source, it comes from an agreement, whether spoken or unspoken, on the part of the players, on the part of the musician, as to what it is they're doing and where it is they're going. At some point, it seems to me that we have somewhat of a disadvantage in the sense that we don't see ourselves, again, as part of a group of people, as a whole people, that we do things in relationship to each other, that we don't have to think that I have to rest on my own bottom and that there's no support system. I'm not part of anyone else's and no one else is a part of mine. And I have to yield to the demands of a social system that is unkind and inhumane more often than we would like to see it. So I think that these are questions, these are philosophical questions, probably rhetorical discussion. But I do want us to know that there are some things that we can choose not to do, or some things that we can choose not to accept. There are some things that we can choose to change. that there are some things that we can introduce into the world that may not already be there, or heighten the visibility of that may already be there, but people are not paying attention to. I'm interested in this because I have daughters and granddaughters and great-granddaughters, and of course the great-grandsons and grandsons and sons. So I'm very interested in what this world is that you're describing to me, that they are living in and will continue to have to operate in, because, you know, I'm practical, you know, and I know perfectly well that on the plantation there were limitations of things that we could aspire to, that we could do. It didn't kill the dream. It didn't stop us from not wanting to continue to be in bondage. It didn't keep us from envisioning a day when things could be different, when things could be better, and when we could be different in those days. So I think that what I'm struggling with here is that I want young women to look at the world as though the world is malleable, that it can change, and that when it comes to the well-being of yourself and your progeny, it must change if it is against their welfare. You must take responsibility for changing that which needs to be changed. And there are things in this economy, I have to say this, people are working on contract. You know, they don't get hired by companies. They have intermediate companies that get them positions with companies, and then they get a contract, and the contract has a year or two or however many years the terms are. And they have this job, and they have a living and what have you. When the contract ends, their employment is terminated. Generally, even though they know that, they tend to be devastated and unprepared. And now there's this gnashing of teeth and this great anxiety about, now what do I do next?
Let me get a couple of pieces in. The world that you asked to change changes in the face of a demand for change, and we women are the change agent. Right? We're the ones with a different idea, and so we're not totally at its mercy. What we are is in a place where we have to understand that what we need has to be accommodated in the world as well. And in order for the world to respond to what we need, we have to make the demand. We have to, not a ask, not a wish, not a Disney-esque, a demand for space. My best illustration is the ocean, very big. The oceans are very big. And people like to say, well, you can't do everything at once. You can't boil the ocean. And I go, boiling the ocean is not the right image here. I'd rather say, if you throw a small stone into the ocean knows it's there. You know, there had to be a displacement in all that is water in order to accommodate the new thing that wasn't there before. And if the ocean itself can be that sensitive and that responsive to the business of change, the environment that is around us, our society, our economies, our communities, our families, also have to make room for a new idea about our possibility as women, our probability as women, and know that that is a good thing too. The business of getting ready for the volatility of what it takes to earn a living in the world today is everybody's concern. And I don't know that very many people would say, I got it all. I got a handle on this, and I'm free to go and rise. But I do know that the example that you gave, a contract, if a person takes a contract as a means for employment,
if that's the only thing available,
whatever,
understand.
maybe they may choose it.
Okay.
However, but if that is the engagement that you're in, then understanding the nature of it is essential at the beginning. You can't take it and then try to make it something that it never was meant to be. So what we're looking for is women to look straight at stuff, assess what is that, and then determine if that's something that you choose to be or need to be a part of. And if so, understand what it is and where your place is and then what you can do with that. So when you take it initially and you know what it is, it's more than perhaps just a chance to do the work. Sometimes some women will take it as a chance to experiment in another industry or to meet people they would not normally have a chance to work with. Some will hope that maybe this will transition into something more permanent. Others say, I can't wait for this contract to be over with because I hate this. I want what comes next.
Let me keep you in this vein for a little. Very often when someone takes a contract, they think, if I get my foot in the door and I work really hard and I'm really efficient and I really bring value to this operation, they will see me. They will see my good work and they will reward me. They will take me off this contract and they will give me a regular job. It's kind of like in the TV version of Roots, where when Kissy, was it Kissy, who taught herself to read and wrote herself a pass and went to town and was discovered to have left the plantation without permission. Then it was the slave owner decided he would sell her. And her mother went on her knees and she said, Master, after all these years we have served you, you would sell my child. You don't earn any credits. Every morning when you wake up, the slate is wiped clean. It is as though the day before you did nothing that had any value. And we keep hoping, not facing the reality of, no matter how much we contribute, and we have contributed everything to this society, no matter how much we contribute, we keep hoping that one day it will be realized that we are an asset and not a liability, and we will be welcomed into these places of employment, and we will find some degree of security. Now, you go where you want to. I just had to get that said.
Then I'm going to go in that room with you.
Okay.
When you take a contract, you have to know you are not, in taking the contract, a potential employee. You are an entrepreneur. Okay? Their business has contracted with your business.
But you can't help but sometimes think it will segue into something.
No. We don't do magical thinking anymore. Okay. We delight in looking exactly at what it is. Their big business is contracted with your little business for in exchange for goods, services, goods, or whatever, and in exchange of money or whatever, payment for it. So when you think of yourself as a potential employee, hoping for that, then you're right. You don't have any power. You just have hopes and dreams. When you see yourself as an entrepreneur with quite a lot to offer, so much, as a matter of fact, that the big thing, had to go outside itself, outside all of its resources, in order to get what it needs, and then it determined that it would contract with you, then the leverage and the power that you have is the value of what it is that you bring to the table. So what you want to do now is understand what your true bargaining position is, and then negotiate from the strength of what it is that I bring to the table that you don't have. And then you could have discussions on the terms for that. I have known women who have started out as contractors, and then the company has said just what you said. I want to invite you into the big house now, as part of what we have to offer. And I want to tell you, in those conversations, the money has been right, otherwise they wouldn't have even considered it. Perhaps some of the other benefits were attractive, but usually the women are chewing on this thing. I got to go live in that house. They didn't welcome it. Oh, I'm in the house now. They go, oh, I got to go in there and live in a house that somebody else controls and somebody else, and I got to live in this little space and make make my life happen here. Some women welcome it, and other women, that's not what they really want, and so they endure it. But what I want us to do is to consider the power that you have with your talent. If you consider yourself an entrepreneur, as a matter of fact, some of us are inside of organizations as intrapreneurs. All right? We are inside the company, perhaps paid as employees, but pretty much running the whole thing ourselves, pretty much making the decisions, oftentimes without the resources of staff and other kinds of things. You're pretty much an independent contributor. And all I want you to do is see exactly what your true position is. And then when you do that, you can make really strong decisions on how to advantage your relationship with the company or your relationship with others who need to see you for what you are. There's a great commercial on, I think it's GE. And this young white man has this job. He's trying to explain it to his friends what he's doing. You know?
I've seen that
You've seen that commercial.
Tell it.
And the friends, he's trying to explain what he does, and his friends, they don't get it. So you're doing whatever. He says, my work is going to contribute, he says, to the building of this and whatever that, or whatever. You know, that is what he enjoys, being part of this great big complex of people and resources and things. And so a decision for him to be in GE is a good one, because outside on his own he would not be able to have that experience. But his friends don't quite get it. Well, you know, why did you go into the big company? And so GE does a really good job of selling themselves in that. I would like us to understand how he understands his opportunities inside the big company. But what I really love is that always he talks about himself. What I'm going to do, what I'm going to get to be a part of, what I get to build and do. It's all, he doesn't talk about what GE does. He talks about what he does. And that sentient sense of self is fundamental for you to be able to take care of self, whether you're inside the big thing or external to it. Whether you are before marriage or after, or perhaps not going to do that at all. You have to start with a solid sense of who you are wherever you are. Have you gone to those huge events where you're at the big reception with thousands of people in there? And the first thing oftentimes people do is gravitate towards people who they already know. And I say that's a good thing. People say don't do that, don't waste your time with people. I say no, it's a good thing. You need to know who's in here, who's an ally and a friend. You know, you may need something, or you may be needed for something. So first thing you do is stake out who's with me in this thing. Now, getting that laid out, the next thing to do is go explore. And don't go by yourself. You know, take some folk with you and go from place to place. Meet some new people, have some new conversations, and discover the other possibilities. And that's what you do in new opportunities. And you can do that when you're good with yourself. You can do that when you have faith in your own possibilities and you are up for the discovery. And that is what it is that we are looking for with League of Black Women. We are in a constant state of discovery. There's no point in us getting all comfortable with anything that we see on Monday, because by Thursday, there's some indications of things being other than what we thought Monday revealed. But we only get to Thursday because we got from last Monday to this Monday. You know, so we're in a constant state of move and change and knowledge. And fear is not something that we can allow ever to sit there and call the shots on what we do and what we don't do. And let me tell you about the things that bring fear to a nonprofit organization that we have to kick it out the door.
Funding.
All the time. I used to think it was all funding. Funding is real important, but it isn't everything. I found out that as important are the right partnerships. Because if you get funding for doing things you don't want to do, or things you should not do, if you do that satisfy the needs of funding, then it takes you off course. It takes you off course. You get the money, you do the thing that they wanted you to do, and the next thing you know, you've not done anything
that you plan to do.
That you plan to do or should have been doing. So we got to be careful about even who you invite to the funding discussion with you. One of the other things that is of concern is, will we last long enough in the discussion, in the engagement, to be able to get to the places of influence and power? So we are a power, but at the same time, we have to hook up with other powers. Do you know? So it matters who's in political office. These the people who are in there? Do we have to wait for them to be replaced by other people? It matters who the corporate decision makers are. These the people, or do we have to wait for other people to come in because these people are not going to support what it is that black women are about? And you get some of those hints of what that is when you have in conversations and you say, well, black women, and they say, well, women of color. And I say, no, black women. And they go, yes, it's women of color. And I say, what color are you talking about? I'm telling you, our color is black women. Why are we resisted in being able to simply declare who we are? And I found out that it is easier for others to deal with the idea that we don't need to be dealt with if they keep us under the foggy tent of everybody else. Everybody else. In fact, I asked several researchers, I said, what is the women of color thing? How is it going to help what you're doing? How is it going to help you see us more clearly? Well, Sandra, I just don't want to do that whole long list. I said, what long list is that? Well, the Latinas, the Hispanic, if you will, the black women, the African Americans, if you will, the Asian, it's just too much. I said, so it's just too much for you to actually say who you're talking to about. Why is it you manage to say white, which is one syllable, and you can't say black, which is one syllable? Why is it just okay for you to be able to say that, but you cannot say who we are? The declaration of identity is essential for your first power. You mentioned the movie Roots back. Do you remember the scene where Kunta Kinte
absolutely
is about to be renamed Toby?
Right.
Kunta Kinte is a connection with his community, with his lineage, with his nation. And they wanted to make all that go away and call him Toby. Right. And I am saying to you right here, right now, women of color as a concept is Toby.
Right.
Okay? I know what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be an alliance of all the women who simply aren't white. And I have to ask you, is that the way we want to go? Can't we be allied and use our own identities and not lose anything? Do we have to have a cover over us? So I don't think we do. But we are in a space where we're being asked to choose Toby or Kunta Kinte. And people will teach you how to say Toby. Say women of color, you'll get less resistance. Say women of color, you'll get more funding. Say women of color, you'll be more easily tolerated.
Or say minority women.
And you say that and it'll be easier for you. And we're to the place right now where we understand not the case. There is a brand new museum opened up in Washington, D.C. It's called the African American History Museum, I think it is. Is that its name?
Of the Smithsonian.
Of the Smithsonian, right. And so what's kind of cool is that this museum about our history is for the world to come and touch. Because the leadership of that museum said, this is the world's history. Everybody is connected to this African American history. All right, that is how it is for everybody, but it is about us, for everyone, and everybody's going to find something about themselves in it too. But we need to anchor it about us. And I am saying that our identity has to be clearly about us. And all the different permutations and configurations of us there can be, but we have to own our own names. And anytime I'm in the presence of someone who tries to Toby-rize me,
that's a new one.
With women of color, I said, what color women are you talking about? Well, black women. And I said, then you will do me the honor and the respect of giving me the name back that I gave you for me. Well, Sandra, I didn't mean to be offensive, and maybe you're just a little too sensitive. I said, I'm not going to allow you to be offensive to me. And my sensitivity has been dealt with by requiring that you do what I've asked you to do in this space. And so owning oneself and reveling in it means I don't do that from an energy of rage.
Right.
I want to say something about rage. I think it is a very expensive fuel, and it's why it's kept for the very life and death situations that you are in when you need that burn that hot stuff. The problem with it is it will not let you do a distance journey on it. It flares up and it burns woof, like the rockets that go into space. Woof. And then after it gets you to a certain level of height, then you separate from all of that heat so that you can do the long distance thing. So I am not at all unhappy though with the fire that comes from that heat. I just don't expect to make a daily meal out of it.
You know, there's just so many things I want to go into, but I realize that we call this program Women in Wealth, and that you do have a process by which you believe that Black women can address this notion of women in wealth. You have a concept and a program, and I don't want to let this show end without your having something to say about that.
The condition of Black women as people who don't have wealth is because we have not addressed our own potential. We have not addressed our own potential, maximized everything that we can do. So there are all sorts of resources around us now that talk about financial independence, you know, making us make strong decisions about what we do with whatever money we get our hands on and whatever wealth of things that we inherit or that we acquire. It's telling us, hey, you got to call the shots, not let the offers to take your money away from you determine what you will be left with. And so the League of Black Women has understood that bootstrapping it, that is us saving our nickels and dimes and dollars and doing what we do, will greatly improve our situation. So we need to be smart about that. But at the same time, the League of Black Women has understood, in addition to the financial scene changing, the economic scene for us needs to change. Now, only a government can bring an economic scene change. The government can change because the government controls economies. We contribute our tax dollars to the government largesse, and then the government determines what it will do to shape the economic fortress that is the United States of America. And so the League of Black Women has created not only instructions that you can find for individuals out there to do what you do with your money, but we have said to our government, you must meet us in the field of endeavor with the resources that the government has to offer. And then we have created that discussion as a Black women's economic agenda, which we call Black Womenomics. And in it, it tells our government specifically to do 4 major things. And we're doing it now because we want to start talking to who the leaderships of these various spaces will be in our government. There are 4 pillars of what must be done, delivered to Black women so that our own individual plans for financial independence can flourish. Our economic security has to be maintained by the government, has to be delighted to the government. So that some of that whifty business, programming money and stuff like that, has to make way for actual community investment. Economic equality and equity has to come from the economic government. So economic equality means that we stop earning 50-something cents on the dollar. We need our full dollar. You know, and the government can require that we are paid our full dollar for the dollars earned, because without that, I think with 57 cents or something like that we get on our dollar earned, after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we're more or less volunteering at the job. We're not being paid for it. We also want equity, which means an investment by our government into our potential not only has to be what they call equal, that is, all women get what all women get. It means that we have been deprived longer, therefore the investment in us needs to be deeper. And then that will make us at a level where we'll be equal. We also found out through League of Black Women's work that our interest is less in being equal with the levels of where white women are. Our interest, in, when we listen to Black women's ambition, is to be equal with the highest earners on the planet, all right? So our equity isn't a battle between us and white women. We just don't do that. It is taking a look at what our full potential is and saying we want to be there. The third pillar is economic access in all sectors and parity in all those sectors. So the growth industries, you know, in science and STEM, have to now open their doors because the government says it's no longer legal to keep us out. We used to be scientists. We want to, and we are science-minded women, and we want to be in those industries again. And then also, the fourth pillar is intentional pursuit of joyful living as a quality and standard of life. not something that is optional, but something that actually is the environmental standard.
Part.
It is a part of what we are for. You should not have to suffer
Right.
as an experience in order to have said, I lived a long life and I suffered. Joyful living is essentially a right inside of this Black Womanomics requirement. So what we've done is send a descriptive and prescriptive set of instructions to our government to say, make your legislation in the light of accomplishing these goals. And when you do that for us, in exchange for what we have invested in you, then our own behaviors will maximize our change in situation from poverty to women who are in a state of prosperity. We want to leave the P that stands for poverty in the dust, and we want to start flying the flag of prosperity as something that is highly likely to be the fate and the future of the women that we are and the women that we are going to be. And so this is amazing because now we're talking to our government. I also want to let you know that we are the only population that does not have economic investment and has been told just to do it by yourself. When white men got ready to make their fortunes in America, the government invested in them. All right?
You got 1 minute to
say it. And when white women were provided for, in the Equality Acts, the government invested in them, but it didn't invest in us. And so now we are saying us first, and that is what we're looking for. I want everybody to listen to your show, view your show, become full supporters of just the generous opportunity to have this much time for a rich conversation, and also to join the League of Black Women, because this is where that work is done. This is very much like asking you to join and support NASA. Join the League of Black Women.
Right, so you can take off.
So you can take off.
All right. Thank you so much, Sandra. It's been very invigorating.
Thank you.